What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm also going to talk about why tomorrow is going to be a very important day, as we have big data coming out that will affect the way the market ends up moving. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total. Not to mention 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer ends soon in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, looking at the way the market is moving, I predicted yesterday the market would be testing some tough resistance and to be very careful at that level. What happened was SPY came a little bit short of my prediction. I was thinking about it like 608.5, around that area. It came a little bit short of that. And then we saw this basically reject a bit and attempted to retest near that area and then rejected again. So the tough resistance really did show today, and SPY struggled to break past that new all-time high. So we're starting to show some signs of potentially churning here, but whether or not we truly pivot or see a bit of a pullback is going to depend on some factors. And that's why I want to talk about what those factors are before I break down my prediction about what I think is going to happen to the charts. So firstly, just know this, guys, the market has a very, very interesting amount of volatility that's been developing. As you guys can see in the heat map, let me just reload this for 1 second. Sorry about that, guys. We saw a lot of big tech stocks a little bit more flat, such as like Apple and Nvidia. Tesla led the market up as it was up 3.23%, outperforming many stocks out there. But then a lot of other tech stocks were quite flat, such as like Microsoft, Google, Meta, and the others, with some being red and some being green. Besides that, the market is very mixed between green and red. A lot of sectors like health were a little bit weaker, even like tech was weaker too. Besides that, I would say the market was more flat for the most part, with some selling that was going on. And that's why we saw the S&P 500 and Nasdaq start to sell off a bit. Now, for some data, just know this. What's going to impact the market greatly will be the data that comes out tomorrow. 1 hour before the market ends up opening for tomorrow, which is Friday, December 6th, 2024. At 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the non-farm payrolls, not to mention governmental and manufacturing payrolls. That's going to be impactful alongside the unemployment numbers. These are the two main things, the payrolls and unemployment numbers. And we're going to be watching unemployment very carefully because it's going to be affecting a lot of different things about the economy, what the Fed ends up doing, and how different consumers and investors view the economy. That's why it's very important to watch unemployment. The Fed's job is to monitor and kind of like help keep the labor market intact. So it's going to be their job to pay attention to this, and it's going to have a big effect on the way the broader markets move. For unemployment, we're expecting 4.2 to 4.1%. If we get 4.1%, the market could go either way because that's the same thing as what we got before and even the month before that. And then if we get 4.2% or higher, that's going to be a little bit more bearish for the markets. If we get 4% or lower, that's going to be a little bit more decent. That would signify a little bit more of a bullish move. Now, so far, the expectation is that unemployment does continue to hold around these levels, maybe even increase. And that's what typically happens when you see rates at these rates. So we'll see how it goes. But I just want to call that out just to give you guys some insights about that. So we'll see what happens 1 hour before market open with all this data coming out. As you guys know, I'm not really a fortune teller. I'm not always correct about my predictions, so I don't know what's going to happen with this data. But just know it's going to cause a lot of volatility. And then at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, that's 30 minutes after market open, again, we have more data. The Michigan Consumer Sentiment Reports and inflationary expectations could cause a little bit more volatility. So watch to see what happens after that. But the main times for volatility would be 8:30 a.m. and 10 a.m. Watch to see what happens with the unemployment numbers. Besides that, we had a couple of earnings come out for today. I already went over these in my morning videos. Dollar General was very, very mixed. They had mixed earnings and revenues that were reported, not as strong as Dollar Tree, unfortunately. And there's not really much else that's going on with that. Most of the earnings today were very minor, so I'm not going to talk too much about them. Even tomorrow, we have very minor earnings, so I'm not too worried about that. But one more thing worth mentioning is this. The fear and greed index is currently at greed, but it's very close to becoming neutral. If the market turns, that could end up happening. I'm not too worried about this, though. It's not like too crazy, if anything. And if anything, I would say this. We're not that far from extreme greed, or we're pretty far from extreme greed, excuse me. So that can make me think that even if the market does get some kind of pullback, there still is a lot of room for the market to run up higher for the rest of the month. So just keep that in mind. The market still is bullish in terms of the overall trend, even if we do get a small pullback. That's something that you have to remember about the way the market is moving. Momentum is very, very greedy right now. We're at extreme greed because the market's surpassing all-time highs. And then we also have the puts and call option ratio. So the 5-day average is still going down. Again, after Jerome Powell's interview yesterday, after the guy spoke and answered a lot of questions, he was very optimistic about the economy. So we start to see even more of these shorts being closed, more call buying continue to happen, and that's at extreme greed. But just be a little bit careful because typically when we see the ratio this low, the market does tend to pull back a bit. That's what typically happens because we're at a historical trend and there's a lot of people closing shorts. The market makers may try to pull a fast one if that ends up being the case. And finally, we have the VIX. This is currently quite neutral, but there are some signs out there that it might try to balance. We'll have to see about that just to be safe. So I'll talk more about that in just a couple of minutes. But now let's just focus on the charts. What do I see from this point on for the broader markets? The answer is it depends on the data. Let me make this very, very clear. As a trader, you want to be prepared for anything just to be safe, because when you're prepared for anything, nothing should be able to phase you too much. So what I mean is, if we get good data tomorrow, if all the unemployment numbers and non-farm payrolls are decent, if the market likes what we see and we see a low unemployment at 4% or below, there's a chance the market could bounce and surprise a lot of people. Okay. And you always want to be prepared for that just to be safe. So good unemployment numbers would bring this right back up towards the high, and we could be looking for an attempt to retest all-time highs. However, if the opposite happens and we get bad unemployment numbers, if the data is not too good or we get a more negative reaction, I think that's a better way of putting it. If we get a more negative reaction to the numbers, that could also lead to more downside. So if SPY ends up losing this 606 area, we're looking for 605.25 as our support. If that fails us, I think we go down to 604 close to our 20 EMA. And then if that fails, that's also where the gap happens to be. The next support is going to be down at 602. So make sure you watch those levels very, very closely. Those are going to be your supports. What does the chart favor, in my opinion? Looking at the daily time frame to start things off, the daily on SPY is starting to reject a little bit here. If we lose the support around 605, we do have this big gap to fill down to about the 604 area, maybe a little bit under that. So that could signify a bit of a dip before we try to bounce. However, when you look at the daily, guys, check this out. When I zoom out all the way like this, what you'll see is that we're still on an uptrend. We had this low here, we made a higher high, higher low, higher high. So even if we dip just a little bit, even if we get a small 5-point dip, or if we dip a little bit, that does not mean I'm bearish or a big bear in the markets. We could still dip and then rebound and continue to push for the end of the year. So you want to keep that in mind, guys. Even if we do dip a bit, that could just be another buying opportunity. That does not mean we have to turn into perma bears. I will become a little bit more concerned if we start losing our EMAs, but we're not even close to them. So the trend still remains very, very strong and bullish. There's no sign of us turning into a bear trend. We're still very, very bullish. Now, for the short term, okay, there could be a dip coming. And the 4-hour does show that as well. We're starting to turn right now. We have a gap to fill around 604, so the chart does favor us dipping. So that seems like a higher probability. We do favor a little bit of a dip that could be coming. But once again, just remember, if we do end up dipping, the market is still bullish overall. And whether or not we truly dip depends on the data, so we'll just have to see what it looks like. But just know, technically speaking, SPY does favor a possible dip. For ES, we hit 6100 as our resistance. If we break that, we have another resistance to watch for around 6120. And then if we can't break past that, we're going to be looking at support around 6077 on ES. If that fails us, we dip all the way down to about 6060, so keep that in mind. In my opinion, what I think is going to happen is this might try to push a little bit during the pre-market, and then once the data comes out, we'll have to see what kind of reaction we get, whether it's up or down. This does favor that it might be coming down a little bit lower to about 6,077, and if that fails us, I'll be looking for this previous resistance becoming support around 6060. So we'll see how it goes. We do favor downside a tiny bit more, but just to be safe, we'll have to see what the numbers end up looking like. For Nvidia, I mentioned in my video yesterday I was expecting 146 or so. If we had broken that, we're looking for 147.5. And if we didn't break that, we'd be looking for a pullback. And notice that so far we're starting to pull back just a bit here. So could this be like an inverse head and shoulders forming on Nvidia, where we have like a left shoulder here? This is our head, and we're about to come down from our right shoulder and bounce. We'll see about that. That's always a possibility. But that's just a theory. So if we get good unemployment numbers, you want to see this thing break past 146 to hit 147.5. If we get not the best of numbers or we get a negative reaction, we're looking for Nvidia to start dipping down to 142.5, followed by 141.3 as a potential target. I think that the 4-hour looks a little bit more bearish, so we could be dipping lower. So keep that in mind. There is that possibility. I think that this is favoring that it might be dipping to at least 143.64, if not 142.5. But just to be safe, we'll have to see what the numbers look like. The chart does look weaker, but we'll see just to be safe. Bitcoin rejected a bit. It did try to hold above 100,000, which is still great. And I see there's so much upside potential for Bitcoin for the long term. But for the short term, I would still be very, very careful at these levels. If we end up losing our support right here around the 95,000 area, we do have the risk of coming down to the low, very close to like the 92,000s. And if we manage to get back above 98,000, we're looking for a push to attempt right back up to the highs at 100,000. So I think that we're going to attempt to push in the morning tomorrow towards 98,000, but then there's a risk of us dipping a little bit lower as we have a big red bar forming and a potential shift on the daily. There's also this bearish divergence that's been developing, so that's not the best of signs. So there could be a little bit of a range developing on Bitcoin between 91,000 and about 100,000. I know it's a big range, but just know that Bitcoin is typically very volatile, so it's not really a surprise. So we should attempt to rebound tomorrow morning, but then we could dip depending on the numbers. So we'll see about that. The trend does look a little bit weaker nonetheless. One stock that was very strong today was Tesla. We had a very, very nice looking cup and handle like structure, which led to this breakout, and we went all the way up to about 375. If we get good numbers or some good news, if Tesla tries to break 375, I think we easily go up to about 380. And if we can't break past them, we get a little bit of a dip. We're looking for an attempt to dip back down to about 362. Now, the chart is trying to dip just a little bit right here, so it does favor that it might dip a little bit first before it tries to bounce. So watch 365 and 362 as potential targets. But just know this, guys. The trend is bullish on Tesla. We had a low all the way down here. We had this low down here around 306. We bounced, made a higher low. We bounced, made a higher low, and we're breaking the highs all over again. So this is a breakout on Tesla. Typically what happens is we continue to uptrend as time goes on. Even if we get a small dip tomorrow, this could just be another buying opportunity, and Tesla could just continue to push upwards for the $400 target as the next couple of weeks progress. So we'll see how Tesla ends up reacting to the data. There's a risk of it dipping a little bit on the chart. If we do get the dip, though, I'm not really too scared because we could be looking for a big reaction nonetheless, and the uptrend could perpetuate. For NQ has this resistance around this 21,500 area, and we have this main support to watch for around 21,425. If that fails us, we're looking for 21,367. That's also aligning very close to the previous all-time highs. So we'll see which way it ends up going. Right now, it looks like it's turning on the 4-hour. It might try to attempt to rebound here before it tries to get closer to about 21,376 before it tries to bounce again. So there might be a dip coming, but we'll have to see depending on our data. The QQQ looks a little bit weaker, and especially because of the fact that we have this gap down here around this 517 area. If we're bearish tomorrow, we get a bad reaction, we lose 520, I think 517 is coming. If we hold above 522, we could try to bounce for 524. It could go either way, but just know there's a risk of us coming down to fill that gap around 517. There is a higher probability of this dipping, in my opinion, but we'll have to see depending on the data just to be safe. For Apple, we're just trending sideways in a range, so I'm not really expecting too much. We have 244 as our resistance, and then 242 is our support. As of right now, we're just going back and forth, consolidating, so there's not really much of a direction, but there is a risk of this dipping a little bit lower to about 242 again tomorrow, if not 240, if we get a negative reaction. So please keep that in mind, guys. With that being said, I did a more meticulous analysis right now, but I'm going to be a little bit more concise and more brief for the rest of these tickers, so please bear with me. What do I see for the rest of these? We have Netflix on a very, very strong breakout right here. I mentioned that if we had broken these highs, we're expecting 920. That has come already. And this could react to the data that's coming out. A negative reaction could bring this back down to about $911 a share. And a more positive reaction, we want to see this thing break past 925 to eventually push for 930. I anticipate it's going to be dipping back down for about the 910 area. Maybe it dips and then bounces. It's riding its 20 EMA very nicely, so it could dip a bit before it tries to bounce. But overall, it looks more bullish. MSTR tried to bounce only to reject because it closed below this support over here or very close to it. We're going to be looking at 384 as our main area of interest. Because of this imbalance, I do anticipate that it could be getting closer to 370. We'll see if we bounce off that or not. But I do anticipate some downside for MSTR towards 370. Then we'll see what kind of reaction we get from there. That's the most likely possibility, at least technically speaking. For Celsius, we look a little bit more bearish because we're rejecting over and over again. We're at this support rate here around 27.5, and we have resistance at 30. We'll be watching to see if we get a bounce off this or not. But if anything, this is not the best of signs because we're continuing to reject every time we try to bounce. So look for an attempt to rebound a bit for 28. If that does not hold, there is a higher probability of this coming back down towards the 26s. So be very careful if the chart is showing a little bit of weakness, and then we'll see what kind of reaction we get to that. For other factors out there, I also want to talk about Supermicro. We're seeing a very, very similar trend developing on this. We are technically on a very, very nice uptrend. We're making higher highs and higher lows, and we will ultimately, in my opinion, be approaching 49 soon. However, depending on the data tomorrow, this could dip just a little bit back down towards our 39. It's about 37.5 area. It might be a small dip before it tries to bounce higher again. And that's because of what happens with their data and because of the fact that we're making a lower high here. So there's this high over here, we're making a lower high, which makes me suspect there's a possibility of this dipping just a little bit back down towards 39 before it tries to bounce. Palantir is more bullish, making higher highs and higher lows. We're holding our 20 EMA very, very nicely. If we lose 70, we're looking for 69.26, followed by this 65 area. And if we continue to break out, we look more bullish. So in my opinion, the chart's very, very bullish right now, making higher highs and higher lows. Could dip just a little bit before it tries to continue to break out. So look for a dip back down for the 71 area before it tries to bounce for 73.5 or higher. For Rivian, I think we have a very, very nice range right here. We might be dipping back down to about 12.02 before it tries to bounce back up. But overall, it's doing a great job at holding up. If we lose 12.02, we're looking for essentially 11.56 as our supports. So look for a little dip here before it tries to bounce, but overall, it looks more bullish. For SoFi, we have kind of like a head and shoulders like structure. I am a bit concerned about this setup. We were very flat today. We actually saw we're a little bit flat in the afterwards. We're red right now. And there's a head and shoulders developing on here, which could lead to a little bit more downside. If we break past 15.91, we turn back up. If we lose 15, if we continue to fall, we're looking for 15.36 as our target. If that fails us, this could be dipping even lower back down to the breakout at the 14 area. So I think, there's a head and shoulders, and I think there's a risk of 15.36 right now. The IWM Russell 2000 is looking a little bit weaker. We want to see this thing get back above 240. Otherwise, this is at risk of dipping lower. Look at 238.4 and 240 as our resistances. If we don't break past that, there's a risk of us coming down to some balance for 235. So I do see a risk of some downside. For AMD, we could be retesting 140.87. If that fails us, I think we dip back down for essentially 138. So unfortunately, it's a little bit weaker. This could be a slight dip depending on our unemployment numbers. If we bounce off 140, though, we could be looking for an attempt to get back up to 144. But I favor 140 to 138, and then we'll see if we bounce off that or not. ARM looks a little bit more bearish. We're looking for 137.85. If that does not hold, this imbalance takes us down to 134. For Coinbase, we attempted to pump only to reject, so now we're barely holding 316. If that fails us, we go down to 306, looking a little bit weaker now. So I was expecting this to push higher initially, and yes, the higher move did come. We did push to the 340s, but then we rejected after that. So it pumped, then rejected, and now we're going to be watching 316 to be tested. We'll see if that holds or not. For Amazon, we did a good job. It's very tricky because I did see some negative news involving lawsuits coming out, but it's still holding up despite that. We have 220 as our resistance. If that breaks, we're looking for 222. And if we fail at 220, we're looking for a dip back down to about the 217.5 area. This will depend a lot on the unemployment numbers. We're just kind of stuck right now at 220. So we'll see which way it ends up going. This is looking like it could go either way to me. Meta is looking weaker here. It has a double top bearish divergence. If we break past 610, we're looking for 612. If not, our target is 598. 600 to 598 could be coming. I presume that the most likely cases we dip closer to 600, so we'll see what kind of reaction we get at least from here. Microsoft looks more bullish. We're looking for essentially 444. If that breaks, we're looking for higher levels. If this rejects, we're looking for 440 as our main support. Overall, it's on a very, very nice uptrend. We favor more upside, but just be a little bit careful because we are approaching some tough resistance near 444. So in my opinion, let's see what the reaction is. Can we break 444 to remain bullish? If not, I will anticipate a bit of a dip back down to about 440. So keep that in mind and watch that level. Google looks a little bit weaker. We're looking for 173 as our main support. We'll see if we bounce off that or not, but look for a little bit more downside. Tomorrow is the most likely case, and we'll see how it goes from there. For GameStop, we're breaking out right here. We'll see if we hold above 28. This could be approaching the 30 plus area. If that breaks, we have this imbalance to fill up for 31, so it's looking a little bit more bullish. AMC managed to bounce as well. I didn't really talk about this yesterday, but just know that this now has the potential to break out for 5.4 as long as we're above 5.2. DJT did dip a bit. We're going to be looking for an attempt to get back down to 32.2. We'll see if we bounce off that or not. The VIX is showing a little bit of life, but we have to get back above 13.67 to really bounce. Otherwise, this just remains a little bit more subtle. For the 10-year treasury yield, this has been dipping thanks to Powell's speech. Not really affecting the market as much, but this could be dipping to about 4.15. The dollar has been dipping a bit, so we'll see if this bounces or not off support around 105.5. With that being said, I thank you all so much for listening, guys. Please have an absolutely fantastic rest of your days. I'll be back tomorrow before market open to give you guys some updates on what the charts are looking like, not to mention the very important unemployment numbers. So get ready for big data coming out for tomorrow. This will most likely lead to a big move, so get ready for that. I'll see you guys very soon in the next one. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, night, or evening, wherever you guys are around the world, and peace out.